Hey, it's George at New Spirituality, and I'm super excited and stoked to be back again. It's been about 2 days since my last video, and the Metatron's Tesseract has really been awesome. Got so many new cool finds and opened up so many new areas in sacred geometry in just the past few days. So I'll be sharing a lot of those new insights with you here. And like usual, I'll just jump right into the screen share and move from there. So let's get the presentation up. Let's go over to here first. So yes, the other day on Facebook at my page and on my friends list, I put this, hold on, I have to zoom in here. Did this drawing or image here, and it really says a lot. The cool feature that I really loved including here, and the one I put on Facebook had a slight adjustment that I had to do to this Tesseract shape in here, because a lot of this video, what we're going to be doing is taking an image and looking at it from a bunch of different views, and figuring out where those lines are specifically when you take it without doing it in like an AutoCAD program and doing it accurately takes some adjusting. So here is what the Metatron's Tesseract looks like from that view. And the image here with Buddha at the center, I call this one Buddha Nature Awakening. And the earth, and you've got Da Vinci here, and the sun, and the earth and the moon proportions. I just found it a really striking and beautiful image, was able to put that out on the full moon. And this is what that looks like in two different sizes. And I want to go back now and just revisit some of the things that I was talking about in the previous video about the Christ consciousness grid and the map. The previous video was called Metatron's Tesseract, the map to Christ consciousness. And we're going to continue to elaborate on that a little bit more. And, really check out that first video because I added so much. This will be a part 2 to that. This will be the part 2. And, what the Metatron's Tesseract did for me was it really unlocked my ability to see the sphere, right? The circular sphere. Now not a flat circle. It's made spherical. So we're going to spend some time in this video here checking out what it looks like to be playing with the sphere inside these different shapes. So let me even go a little larger here so we can get some extra room off to the side, because I first want to just focus on these shapes right here, these 3 over here, because essentially they're the same shape. It's just a cube, right? It's just a cube. I'm going to stop the share in a second here, but it's just rotated. So for one, you've got the circle, right, in the middle, and that fits perfectly with inside the cube. But once we turn the cube to kind of face towards you, like pointed like this is how the flower of life is done, all of a sudden the sphere that's inside of it is now not touching the outside edge of the box. It doesn't appear to be, but it is. Okay, so this is still within that box. And the same thing that's here, this sphere on the outside, this big one, right? So we have a smaller sphere within a larger sphere. This is actually the cube. These points here are touching the outside of that spherical shape. So this was kind of like a big aha for me. This is, kind of well-known stuff, but there's not a lot of images out there that I was finding to be able to do it precisely like this. That the sphere, the cube edges are touching the sphere, not right along the edge. But, I've been drawing these shapes now, and there's not any sacred geometry book that I have that really goes into depth about talking about how the sphere is changing in relationship to the cube. I could see it's in here, but usually I would just draw it around or draw it around. I used to, until yesterday, pretty much every time I drew a circle around a hexagon and called that a cube, I was pretty much envisioning in my mind, well, that must just mean that all those circular edges, right, the circles touching the edge of the box. And what I've discovered as I, did these, because all these circles are all the same, was that there's actually some space between that outside circle. So then I was like, well, what does that mean for like the flower of life? And I'm going to show you all that in just a moment, a little bit further on here. Well, because the flower of life, I'm picturing a bunch of, uh, little Star of David Metatron cubes, within each of those. But now all of a sudden I've got a cube turn. So if you turn this totally spherical, the one measurement that gives you, where we'll definitely know, and these are the same ones over here. I'll do those too. This is the cube. Now inside, pointed up and down. So now we know that those 2 points are definitely touching the edge of the sphere. But now look at the same size circle on the inside of this. So I know I'm going on and on about this, but it was really kind of revelatory for me. And I think for you as people who are interested in this, to start to envision the size of the cube in relationship to the sphere. Because remember, the circle and the square, not the sphere and the cube. So when we used to do that, when we did the spiritualization of matter between the circle and the square, those are flat images. Now we're doing this in relationship to the sphere, to the cube, okay? So this is what this looks like over here with the black box being the cube, and inside it, these red lines are actually showing you where the regular star tetrahedron is sitting within that. So here's the star tetrahedron facing up and down. And here is the same star tetrahedron, right? It looks really long here, but now here it's just in box looking form. So it's like a 6-sided die basically, which is that over here. And then this is now what you normally see in the flower of life design, but the circle's not touching the outside perimeter, okay? So let me, we've seen that. Let me just stop this, and I'm, definitely going to try and remember to turn it back on, because I did that a few times in the last video where I just started going without showing you anything on the screen. So I'm going to show you just what I did with this one right here, okay? So here's the square, right? And I don't have a sphere to put around it, but here is the square version. And now if I just tilt this a little bit so the point is facing right towards you, we've just changed it. We've just changed that into what you typically see when you're looking down at the flower of life. That center ball, the one that's pointing you, is basically directly in alignment. But if I tilt that now and hold that orientation to the side, and I talked about that in some of my other videos, well, your angle here is off to the side. It's not, vertical, the north-south poles here, okay? So, but remember, we learned in the other video, or at least I've been learning about, discovering about the rotation is all contained within this, but this is actually a different degree tilt. I think it's like a 15-degree angle than the 23.5 of the actual Earth axis. So, okay, so here's the square. We angle that towards you. Now we've got it looking like flower of life. And now if we want to get that facing straight up and down into this orientation, now that is now we know that this circle is going to go all the way around, right? From the top point around. These outer edge points aren't going to be touching because, this circle is perfectly round, the sphere is. They'll be touching an inner wall of the circle, of the sphere, as it kind of wraps around this. Now, this is actually kind of the orientation when people are talking about, activating their Merkaba field, the diamond body of light. They're talking about looking at it as if the north-south is, up and down, basically. So whenever you're now seeing some images where you have this point facing to you like this, you'll know that that's really showing you that you're looking at the flower of life, or the star of the Merkaba, in this type of angled view, all right? amazingly, that to think that it really is a box and there's an octahedron in the middle. This black is the octahedron in the middle of it. It's a cube. Now, the Metatron's Tesseract that I was working on, the Soul Star, that in the other video, that balloons these out to the 24-sided figure. And I really think that's going to be our next step in, you know, containing the star tetrahedron within a bit of a larger form that has that octahedron around it. So I hope that gives you a bit of a sense of how we look at these how we look at these shapes, and what it means to when you're doing your visualizations of your Merkaba, because all this isn't just forms to kind of look at and play with. We're inside this form here, and that's what's connecting us to the Christ consciousness grid. I mean, all our atoms, everything's connected to these types of shapes and geometries. So, you know, having a real good visual mental conception of what it's looking like is quite important. So here we go. I'll go back to the screen share. So now that we've figured out what the sphere is kind of looking like in that, I'm just going to revisit the Christ consciousness thing that I was talking about, you know, the concepts of how sacred geometry is related to reaching that 9th level. So let me zoom in here a bit for you. Oops, that's a bit too much. There's a big one. Let's back it out. We'll go to, maybe I could do it at 25 at least, maybe 33. All right, so here we go. Now, here's the cool thing I discovered about that, because I took my my square and I put it in, you know, right here. And when I did that, the yellow circle around the, you know, the goldish yellow circle that I like to call it, the golden orb, the amazing thing is that automatically at the 5th level, so if you don't remember from my previous video, the 5th level of consciousness is where we're currently at, and it meets the 6th square. The little circle would be 5 to 6, and that's a 2.3 difference in its phi ratio. So, you know, Drunvalo in the Flower of Life book, he's talking about that we've been out of harmonic with nature, and that's been leading to a lot of the situations that we've been finding ourselves in, especially environmental destruction and things like that as well, and how we're treating our earth and one another, because we're disharmonically. And this should be a quick, rapid transition to another state of consciousness, which we're moving towards. So this would be us in the 5th box. Now he talks about Da Vinci and others looking for the Christ consciousness grid in their work, and that would be over here at the 7th square, right? So the very cool thing that I think is very neat about this, when I now actually have put the square as it relates to where the sphere is that the sphere is already around our box. So we're literally talking about this in terms of busting out of the box to a new level of consciousness. So you can use that metaphor. And, you know, the neat trick here that Drunvalo was talking about, and that, you know, we can easily do, is when you rotate the box, right? Well, that automatically touches up on the 7th level, right? So now this cube is still, you know, it's still a box, but it's oriented differently. But now the neat thing that happens is if you start to, let me get the box out of there. I like it. Yeah, let's get the box out, because if you start to tilt that box, and I'm going to show you this with the props in a second here, the star tetrahedron. When you start to tilt that box, the sphere, remember, stays the same. So here we are, the outer sphere is staying the same at the 9th, but look, we've tilted that a little bit, and all of a sudden, because we're inverting our body of light, right? This is the Merkaba. We're activating the Merkaba through this, because the majority have a square, flat top of the head. It's not activated the body of light. So we're activating this body of light by starting to tilt the Merkaba field so those north-south poles line up above. So here it is, it's starting to be tilted. It's at the 8 and, you know, down at the 8 at the bottom. So we just started to jump up a little bit there. And this is now the classic flower of life orientation. Okay, so when we draw the flower of life, this is the form, this is what we're looking at. But remember, now it's not touching that sphere yet. So we've gone through those two transitions. And as we come a little bit further, we're going to now bring in the fully inverted star tetrahedron. And now that is the same square, okay, that started off, this one, is now fully inverted, meaning the diamond body of light, the Merkaba vehicle that we're contained within, is now activating and activated because it's touching the Christ consciousness 9, right, to 7, which is the 14 by 18 grid. And the beautiful thing about this is that this is Da Vinci. When Da Vinci drew his Vitruvian Man, you know, it was within this scale, and here's the Christ consciousness scale, and here is how the cube is relating and reacting, meaning it's the same cube, it's the same, this square is the same as the one that just got inverted. Now, my son and I, we love to take dice, because we have a whole dice, you know, collection of 20-sided, 12-sided, 6-sided, you know, we've got all these different sided dice. And we take those and we spin them, right? And we watch which ones have the longest rotation. And, you know, spinning the 6-sided die, when it's flat as a cube, you give it a nice twirl and it will go up on its end and start spinning around. Now, just this past week, when we were talking about the Tetrahedron hexahedron, mind you, he's only 10 years old now, and he teaches me a lot about this material. We decided to do that with the 24-sided die, right? Which this is now, remember, the internal structure of the 24-sided die, that's called the Tetrahedron hexahedron. And this is I call the soul star, and it's some sort of octahedron with 3 points. What is it called? Trisoctahedron, because remember, this is the same structure that gold is, which I showed in my previous video. As gold is looking at gold nanoparticles, this is what that shape looks like. So when we tilt that up, right, that touches the same place. And the really neat thing that I discovered here that I think is just beautiful, because it really helps us visualize this. It helps me visualize this soul star form, because the octahedron, top of the octahedron, lower and bottom box, right? That's what the points of the star tetrahedron come off, but there's a bigger one in the soul star because it lifts it up a little bit. That actually frames in the box, okay? And now here's your pinnacle up to the 9th, you know, to the 9th level, from 5 to 7 to 9, okay? So I just think that that's a really neat thing. So when my son and I, we took that 24-sided die and we had it laying down on its flat side, you know, where it would be like a 6-sided die just flat on the ground. And we just gave that a twirl, boom, it just went up, it spun and had a really awesome, nice spin, a long spin to it. So, you know, I use all sorts of fun ways to interact with this material, and, you know, playing with the dice and watching the spin and timing how long it takes before the wobble sets in and all that is all kind of part of this process. So when we look at this, remember, now this is how the Christ consciousness grid is connected to it. Remember, this is the dodecahedron, and I don't have a drawing of the full Christ consciousness grid, but the dodecahedron is part of that grid. In the previous video, I talk a lot about that. And the dodecahedron, the 12-sided form, that's another one that we spin right on that edge as well, right? So it's not sitting flat on the table like that, okay? It's got the points which meet at the top here and here of the star tetrahedron that's in there, okay? Or the soul star. So those points are meeting. And when you give that a spin, those are the points that it's sitting on as it's spinning around. Now that fits right in there and touches up to the ninth level as well. And the dodecahedron, whoops, that form in the classics has always represented ether or spirit. Okay, so we've got the icosahedron, which is also connected to this form because that's part of the Christ consciousness grid. And before we touch that plane, basically, you know, we've got fire, earth, and the other elements that are in here are the fire, earth, and air. And it's kind of like the air of the octahedron is getting that tilt and fire moving it up towards the pinnacle here. So that's a kind of esoteric way to kind of think about these forms rather than their dodecahedron names and all those hedrony names. They are elements. They have a meaning to them, just like all the numbers and have a life to them when we really understand what they're pointing to. That the whole form and geometry and number completely becomes alive, and it's a living system, energetic system that's surrounding us and penetrating us, right? It's like Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Force, right? 1977, Star Wars, talking about the Force. This is that interwoven field, and we're going to get into that further. So I know I spent a lot of time on this slide, but hopefully that gives you more of a full sense of what we're going to be doing with the sphere and following up on the Christ consciousness material that I talked about previously to really just give you a clear sense of how that all fits in. I just have one more. This is the Metatron's Tesseract here. So that's the form that fits in there, and there's the smaller sphere within that. And just one other little thing on this slide, I did a phi relationship measurement here between this circle here to the edge of this yellow circle here, right, in the Tesseract, from this circle to that circle to the outer sphere. And that is, you know, my tools here are not great for doing it, but it's right around the phi ratio. So this is containing the phi ratio right in here, connecting all of this being essentially connected to life, okay? So let me, you know, I've been looking at that a lot. Let me just show you one more time about how that is tilting up, and I'll probably do it again, right? So here's your cube, right? And, you know, activating the light body activation is, the way I'm seeing it is that the cube is not activated, right? It's not spinning around. It's just, you know, a cube spinning flat on the ground. There's the octahedron in there. And I think even when this is up like this other template still exists down here. So we're contained within this octahedron and the octahedron facing this way. But to really get this moving, you know, we're going from the cube and we're tilting that box, right? So that's putting it up on angle, and it's starting to get into this motion, right? It might wobble a little bit in there like that as it's spinning around, right? And when it's, you know, really humming along nice and fast, well, then that's what we're getting here like this, right? So that's, remember, now that's when this is faced up, you're got the cube at the fifth level of consciousness. So that picture yourself in this little box here, right? And you're still in there, but now all of a sudden you are greatly expanded in consciousness. Okay. And this is spinning, you know, closer and closer to higher speeds of light. Okay. So that's, you know, a lot of what the mystics are talking about, and different spiritual communities who look at sacred geometry and talk about light body activation. That's the way I see how the transition goes from the cube state and how this all relates to connecting up to the Christ consciousness grid, the big leap in consciousness. So let me start the recording here, excuse me, screen share. And almost started just talking about the next slide before I hit it, but I recognized just in time. All right, so now we've got that basics down. So here's a few things we're gonna start to play with that sphere in the cube now and see what happens when we do this. So here's the big cube, right? And remember, this here is the Metatron's Tesseract in the middle of this. So we've got a little tiny, cube in here. It's in the flower of life orientation towards you, but that is the same size cube as this one right here when we tilt it, right? So now we have that little cube. All right, so we're going to start, playing with some building blocks here. And when we take that little cube and let's get a lot of stuff out of the way. Sorry about that. We'll take that cube and then we'll, whoops, grab the wrong thing. Let's grab that one. So here is the level 5 box. I think I moved them out of the way. It could get a little chaotic sometimes if you're grabbing the wrong things. There we go. So we've got 4 of those little spheres in there, and look, now they're going to fit perfectly within inside of the 5 box. Okay, I mean in the 5x5 box, the sphere at the center of Metatron of the Tesseract. And this is what I really love about the Tesseract, because what it's doing is, this is something I've always talked about even in the first videos that I've put out, was that we've discounted, like we've always built out, like there's no sphere in the middle, but there is the sphere in the middle. And in the earlier videos, I went back and forth showing you with like this form that I had to make a choice in building it. Like I couldn't fit the one in the middle. But the Tesseract shows us that the sphere is in the middle and that it actually is the same size sphere of the other 8 that are surrounding that. So, we're not looking at this flat anymore. Remember, there's 2 more spheres behind this, back behind it. So this is a 4x4 cube, a 2x2 cube. Okay, so there's 8 in here, with this one in the middle, which is actually kind of touching the center points of all these other ones here. Now, I didn't do this for this video, but this is something that Da Vinci played around with and studied, because when you draw a circle around this here, this is the original 8 cells in the human body. And Gianvallo talks about this in his book too. That if you draw this circle around here, you can get an outer circle here by taking a circle from the center and drawing another circle around the outside. And then there's this thin little layer that actually separates the cellular membrane between cells, called the zona placunda, that goes around the cell. There's actually a thin little membrane, and you have to have these 4 spheres basically around within this size square to get this. So let me zoom back out and see if there's anything else on this slide. All right, I won't deal with that. So, it's really neat for me to see that we've just taken a shape that we normally look at the flower of life, pointing towards you, and just turned it on side and basically saw, well, that those 8 arrangement, which is basically the 7 around 1, the seed of life, okay, that's the seed of life we're looking around, would be the 7 around 1. And all of a sudden now we have, 8 here and 1 in the middle. So I believe this one is going to get more into the seed of life. So this is the next view. And remember, we've got that same square that's tilted on its side, and we've got a smaller sphere in there. And now we could do the same thing, because here's our template that's containing where that square, that cube with the sphere in it, is going to go right there. So there it is again. And now I can take the same process and put a bunch of those little spheres together and basically have the 4x4 cube looking like that. Now that would be the seed of life. Those are the 8 circles, but there's one in the middle too, right? Because that's what the Tesseract shows us basically. And that's why this is like the next step, this Metatron's Tesseract, because it allows the ability, like I just said before, to put that sphere in the middle of the 8. So there's really, 9 in there total. There's 8 plus 1 at the center. So there's the one in the middle. We could pretend that that one would be placed right back in there to represent that one in the middle. Now, when we start to just build that out, remember that also has that cube now has a cube within it, because now this is a bigger cube. It's a 2x2 cube, which, let's move that. We'll always grab that one. Let's move this one. So now this is basically a repeating pattern. We have this cube here, which has the same size sphere that cube's in. And that sphere touches the outer walls of this new cube. So we can basically put that one right in there. And now we've built that out just like that. So we've got, a larger sphere within a sphere. And we can continue to build that out. I've got some builds later. They're going to show you some really neat, combinations. I'm basically building like Rubik's cubes now with the sphere in the middle and a sphere around it. And it's funny to think that all that somehow relates to Christ consciousness and these levels of consciousness that I've been talking about. So here, now we're going to take the next form of the 3. So we have the side view square, we've got the flower of life, the hexagonal view pointed towards you. And now we're going to do it where it is now at the pointed up stage, where it's all the way up, and we're going to take those. Oh, that one again. I always grab that one. Okay, let's try it again here. There we go, got it. Oh, it's not taking the one I want. So here we go. We're taking that, and now these are, and I've never really seen this this view before. Oh, okay, you know what? I'm just going to delete that because I don't think we need it. So, oh, just deleted a piece of it. Let's get rid of it. Okay, so here we go. We've got this view, and now we've got the spheres kind of stacked like this. And these cubes now are kind of like at a really extreme angle. Remember, they're at this angle, and we're just basically now stacking them on their sides to create the same 4x4 pattern. And, that, of course, will now also fit around another one of the Tesseracts, which will now go around that. Okay, so we're going to have a lot of fun in just a moment playing with a lot of those, of seeing how they continue to build out. So, this is all really cool and neat for me. I know I'm just playing with a bunch of geometric shapes, but it's like really been mind-blowing for me, because I was, we're not really quite clear for a while, like where these spheres are in relationship to this. And that just in itself is very consciousness of elevating for me, because now I'm able to visualize things and create new patterns with these spheres that I wasn't able to do before. In the previous presentation that I did, a lot of these spherical packing are like atoms and cells and all these things coming together. So this is showing how like the flower of life pattern is containing, like I've been talking about, containing all those different atomic levels, from cellular level to galaxy level to human energy field level, water level, elemental level, everything. So now I can really see how the spheres are fitting in the cubes, okay? So this is just another little walkthrough of how we can take the cubes and put them right in there. Right now we're tilting the box up, and I've colored these. So this one is now actually, the blue is now going to be facing up towards you. We have one that's kind of hidden, the red one that would be back behind it is hidden back there. And then we have, the upright inverted version of basically the star tetrahedron. And, that's just fitting right in there really, really nicely, of how those all pack together within the flower of life pattern. So what we're looking at is like the flower of life pattern that we normally see, which is like this, nice interlocking circles. These spheres don't interlock because they're touching each other, but these circles, if I draw circles around these hexagons, they'll be interlocking. The little spheres within those cubes are not, but because they're just bumping up and touching one another like that. But essentially, this is the flower of life here. This is, and this is the flower of life here too, just looked at from different orientation. And of course, this is the soul star within that, and how it relates to the person that I was describing before, each of us. So yes, I wanted to do a little thing on here and just show you, because I color coordinated this to give you a sense of what that looks like with this star tetrahedron. So remember, I had a blue on the diagonal and a red here, and then we turn that up again, right? So we got the red and the red up in the blue here, right? So those are just the cross pieces within the box. Of course, this would also have this, but that's a different length than what these building blocks are, so I'm not able to put it in there for you. So we've got it set up like that, and then now as I tilt this, we can go to that's the version, right? We're gonna have the red pointing towards you, and then as we tilt that back up, well, there's the blue up at the top, and really you would be looking at that, from above like that. So, if you're looking at it from the side, it's like this, but if you're looking at the flower of life image from above, well, that's what it's looking like, right? So the flower of life is showing you your top-down view rather than your horizontal view. And your cube view within there is off to the sides like this, okay? So let me go back and share screen. And so, yes, here I've made it a little bit more translucent for you, basically just showing you the same thing, how you put these together. And that one fits right over there. So we've got the cubes, but if we take those cubes out of it and we just leave it compact with spheres, that's what it would look like. And this is really neat for me as well, because I've always, wondered about Da Vinci's, what this little line here that Da Vinci circle, because he starts that sphere at the feet and it goes up and touches. Well, at least in this case, I found a few other ways that it shows up in different ways it touches, but now we've inverted the spherical version of the star tetrahedron, and the sphere itself, right, is what touches the line above. And he played a lot with, it appears, like the sphere, these smaller spheres within the boxes. And it's not surprising in my mind that he tilted the box and played with it this way and encoded this sphere within here that's touching the top edge of that box. So that's one interpretation or one way to look at it. Just a neat synchronicity to find that. And I keep putting the soul star in here because remember, there's an octahedron in here. This is giving you the tetraxis hexahedron soul star with the 24-sided figure. I don't have that in this slide because I like to look at it as a star shape more. But that is the edges of the octahedron in here would be 1, 2, 3. That would be the front triangular face that this 1, 2, 3-sided face is built off of. So this is in terms of visualizing in your mind, if you're gravitating to the soul star or the star tetrahedron in general, I like the soul star because I can really picture the top of the octahedron around me. And now, before I did this in my visualizations, I always felt to gravitate that the octahedron, basically that is the lovahedron shape, that I've been talking about. Okay, let me back out here one more time for everyone. So this octahedron, okay, for the soul star, this is the points for it. This is an octahedron, 1, 2, 3, and now that is rotating around like this, okay? And these are now the points, which are, we've built the top of the little domed triangular shapes there. They're not, star tetrahedron is down within this because that's giving us the inner points of this, but it's a lower plane, so they're coming out more straight across and touching that. So right at the top edge of this lip here, to the bottom edge of this lip here, they're in soul star form, and energetic body, Merkaba of light. That's where you're hanging out within that lovahedron size shape. And this little pinnacle up here, from here to here, that's hitting the 9th sphere. Your 5th is basically at the octahedron here, and you basically move from, in your movement, when you spin this around, it comes up to like that. So this is where the square is in there, right here. There's the points of the square. That's just a regular cubic face. Now this is the top and the bottom of the octahedron in there. And as that goes around, it can get uprighted to this point, and that gets up to the 9th sphere to circle ratio, jumping past the 7 because it's all now inverted. All right, so let's get back to what is up next. All right, so, when I looked at that, I said, wow, I'm always kind of fascinated with the tree of life because I see it as a geometric structure that there's been, a lot of confusion around, like, what is it built like? How is it built? Is this octahedrons on top of it? Is it cubes? It's can be an interesting, confusing structure. I've placed it in a lot of things. I got another video where I talk about the tree of life, how it's angled, and if you turn it upright and all those things, same train of thought. So here's the tree of life. And that, of course, fits, nicely over the layout of the top-down view of the flower of life. And well, now, I built that as a geometric structure before. I've been kind of curious now, knowing what I know about all these spheres and how the sphere fits in the cube. What is the tree of life now going to look like when you put it in there? And I played around with it a little bit and figured that I was gonna, remember this Metatron's Tesseract here, each of these squares can be the center of a larger square. So they don't have to follow the rules anymore of building, out like this. Each of these squares has a dual role now. And I think this is the most important thing of what the Metatron's Tesseract is teaching us, or teaching me specifically, and sharing with others, is that each sphere is like a dual role. It's the center of a cube and also playing a corner of another cube of many cubes. But it in itself is a center. And this gets into how the center is everywhere and in everything. So every single point in space is the center, and it's also playing a role of a larger pattern, a picture of interconnection. But it itself contains the whole, because each of these little ones are just smaller holographic, views of the bigger picture. So with this, I said, well, I'm just going to now treat the Metatron's Tesseract as if these three going down the center, right, are just straight down the middle, like a tree grows, right? Because a tree, I mean, many can grow on angles, but the majority, if they're in good, healthy condition and out in the open, have a good environment around them, they're going to grow, you know, straight up and down. Not entirely straight up and down, but that, you know, look at a conifer tree, for the most part, it's going straight up and, you know, straight up towards the zenith. So, you know, this now, what I've done here is I've taken the cubes and basically stacked them on top of one another, like star tetrahedrons, tip to tip, but now they interpenetrate one another as they go down through this structure from top to bottom. And that's like a 4D, because remember the Metatron's Tesseract is a 4D structure. So I'm basically playing with the 4D, the fourth dimension, to take an image that now I'm calling a cube and isolating a new geometric structure in there, which I'm calling the tree of life, stacked on top of one another, and taking this form, you know, it's in the same relative position that it is in the flower of life pattern, into this diamond shaped pattern, and stacking it on top of this, going down like that. It's almost like a pen. This is like a pendulum or something like that, or like a crystal. Okay, you just picture this like a pendulum. So that would be kind of my view of a stacked cubes and the last cube to get this last bit. And sometimes I'll delete these. Sometimes the tree of life drawing has these removed, so it's like a little, you know, basically more like a tree positioned like this, coming off of a central trunk, which is part of another cube here. But if they constructed it this way, you know, they left these parts out. So I think that's a totally viable different take on the tree of life, which is oriented vertically now and not in the tilted angles like I've been talking about before. So if we do that with the spheres, you know, here are the different spheres sitting in there. Those fit right in those cubes, just like that. And now we'll do it with the soul stars. And this is what I found really quite fascinating. When you do it with the soul stars, because remember that octahedron is not, so look at this, the gap here between the star tetrahedron here. See how there's this space here? Well, the meeting point between those happens to be the meeting point of the soul stars. So now we're stacking octahedron, and this is really nice, you know, really fits pretty nicely, is that octahedrons are meeting octahedrons, which is actually more geometrically how the flower of, how the tree of life is. The octahedrons meet, and you know, then it fills in the same spot. So we've kind of now got, instead of this broken empty space between the star tetrahedrons, all of a sudden now we've got, you know, a contiguous space of connectivity through an upright version of the tree of life, connected through the soul star version. All right, and that's kind of what it would look like with the bottom pieces removed. So, you know, just another way to visualize and picture the information. But hopefully this is starting to get all our creative juices for people who are watching this to keep going with the forms, keep thinking about them differently, seeing what they reveal. Don't get locked into any one way of viewing or perceiving. Get into the 4D mindset where you're able to, you know, picture a cube as flat or expansive, or many cubes, one behind the other. And, you know, the tree of life as this is, has an angle to it and built out geometrically, but maybe it actually is structured vertically like this, and that's why it's called a tree, you know, rather than the angled tree of life. Didn't say vertical tree of life either, though. So anyway, very neat. And let's play with some other things. So here's where I really, you know, get expansive, start getting expansive with these spheres and start having a lot of fun with what can happen when we take a bigger scale. And, you know, right now I've packed in, made a 27 spheres packed in here. There's 3 by 3 by 3, right? So we've got 27 spheres in there, and we've got the one in the center. So remember, each one of these, it's so cool, is the center of a Metatron's Tesseract. So as I build this out, I could, if I put around this new sphere right here, because I know one fits there, it's building out a Metatron's Tesseract, which is now creating the spaces for the other spheres. And that's how every sphere in here, or every cube, is the center of a larger cube, which has a bigger sphere around it. And now if I stack all these together, I'm gonna make a bigger 4 by 4 cube. So I think I have enough of these. Let's just do it real quick. And this might be a little sloppy looking, but you'll get the basic idea because, you know, visually, and I don't need the grid on there anymore, so let's take that off. Visually, you know, you can kind of see how when I put these in here, it's like a basic hexagon type of shape. Now I have a bigger stacked set of cubes containing lots of little cubes, and many of those little cubes that you see in here, all of them, are going to be contained within these center of the Tesseract. And it's allowing the ability to not just now link cubes together, you know, like, well, if this one was angled right, you know, linking them like that, or putting them together just like boxes on top of boxes. It's, you know, the Tesseract is containing the center and the corners all at the same time, which is just, you know, awesome. So here's the bigger, the white circles are now the spheres that are now within each of these cubes. And I could go bigger and put one around this whole thing, and this hexagon shaped cube now becomes the center of that. And we can look at this vertically. If we just say, like I did before with the tree of life, we can pretend that those just go stack on top of each other. Now, this is actually the flower of life. There's 27 spheres, base spheres within the flower of life. In my previous video, I called it 33 because when you build an octahedron off of here, this face, it actually is invisibly hidden behind that sphere right there. So it actually is 33, depending on how you're looking at it. But if it's a smooth space cube like this, it is just 27. And this is, I don't know what that circle is. It's, well, it's the inside of this one. And I believe if it's the inside of this one, then it will also be the inside of this one here. So that's the sphere that would be the inside of this cube right here. Now, here's the flower of life, probably like you haven't thought about it before, but if you take the flower of life design, all those beautiful concentric circles, and you just turn it, you know, into the cube version like this, this is what you get. You get basically this is like a magic square. It's tic-tac-toe. You know, you can play tic-tac-toe. So it's even tic-tac-toe. We played, probably everybody as kids played this, and as adults probably too. You know, the tic-tac-toe basically is the flower of life. You know, that framework, the grid framework, is a view of the flower of life. So now I said, let's do it with the angular version. So remember, we've got three views. We've got squared, we've got hexagonal, and we've got the diamond shape. And I believe maybe, this is part of our process in our evolutionary way of thinking about things in terms of our macabre field. And I believe I've read this in places, is like, maybe even John Vallo in one of his books maybe said this, is like, besides the evolution of the feminine sacred geometry compared to the masculine, which a lot of this is, we're going very much into the spherical and finding where the spheres are within the lines, that we'd also be moving, of course, from the square to the hexagonal to a diamond shape. The diamond is going to be a very much more important part of our process of evolution, if thinking of things in this diamond type shape, and that would correspond to the inverted level 9 point on the grid that I showed you with Da Vinci before, the Christ consciousness place. So I plugged that together in diamond form to give you the diamond shape Merkaba. So this is the flower of life. Now inverted one more point to pull it upright, from pointing at you to the up-down version, right? So this is a horizontal view of the 27 spheres within that design and how it fits cubically. Pretty cool. And, before yesterday, literally, I didn't do anything with these spheres and these cubes at all. The Metatron's Tesseract is what completely opened my eyes to how the sphere relates to the cube. And that's why I think it's going to be a really important structure for sacred geometers and people who are just into sacred geometry, artists. You'll look at this, you'll see a lot of this stuff. Some of it is actually in, books on atomic structure, geometry. They talk about a lot of spherical packing, but it's part of our artistic, creative, spiritual evolution rather than just it being connected to how we can pack different spheres together in boxes. This all connects back to the jump from the level 5 consciousness, I call 5 to 9, the 10 to 18 jump there to the 18th circle. So I really wanted to go bigger, right? And with the same form, let's go out. We got to get to 15% on this one. Oops, it's gonna work. Oh shoot, went in too far. 15%. So now we're really in it. You jumped the whole quantum level of consciousness there. Let's go 15. There it is. So there it is. Nice, huge, 216 spheres within that, placed together. Big Merkaba. If I put that on the consciousness grid, it's way, it's way off out the top. 216, 6, 7, 8, 9, half of 432, all significant numbers to creation, harmonics in life, nature. 432 hertz, great music to listen to in that because it follows that phi ratio relationship and connection rather than the 440 tuning that we've been listening to for a few centuries. So, really neat. So you could see, here's the cube, here's the box, and I was able to stack these so you can get the dimension to it. And this reminds me, like in the previous video, of how I saw the gold and how they're packing the little nanoparticles within gold. Well, I now have a way to start creating many forms where I can pack these now together and create large units of little packed atoms in these structures, basically, or little cells, or whatever way you'd like to look at it. It's just really cool for me to check this, to see the flower of life in little spheres like this within the cubes. And So I took a turn there and we can build it out to 64, right? That would be the next step. So this would be rather than the 3, so the next build out would be 1 layer out and it'd be a 4 by 4. And now here are all the little cubes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 by 4, and there'd be 64 spheres in here. So this now is what Metatron's cube is, 64 spheres. So we went from the 27, or 33, I like to call it, over to the 24 spheres. So let's go take a look at this one as we zoom in just a little closer here. So, here's basically the big cube, and I could put a bigger one around. It's all the Metatron's Tesseract. Each of these is the center as well as part of the bigger structure. And what I found here is when I started doing this, these black circles, the bigger ones of these bigger blocks that I'm putting in here, when you start to link those together, they came through the center of the structure here, right? So those, when you link them in, now picture they're all over the place, but I only did so much that we can get just one, okay? The first one is being rounded out, okay? And there's a little spherical, Merkaba in there, a little spherical star, David, 6-pointed star starting to show up. We know it's got dimension to it now. And the spherical version there, that was really cool. So, of course, that brought back a lot of memories of this shape, because now we're getting down to like where we can keep going smaller and smaller, but at some point at the center of every sphere, we're going to get down to this point, the vector equilibrium, Buckminster-Fuller, pretty much when he was looking at this is like, this was the heart of it all, right? The 12 points around 1. So this dotted lines are going into the center, and this is called the Cuboctahedron. This is the truncated version of the cube and the octahedron trying to be together. But if you cut off the octahedron parts, which are these squares, and you cut off the cube parts, that would give you the cuboctahedron. So the octahedron and the cube are, meshed in and related to all this throughout all these builds. And the cuboctahedron is the truncated version of that. And it has this hexagonal structure in the middle and all these points. It's basically the same inwards as it is outwards. So it's in complete equilibrium with itself. Every single length within this is the same. So let me stop the screen share. So this was one of the first forms, whoops, got some little Klingons. This was one of the first forms that I got really excited about and drew over and over again. And it was like really unlocking a lot of things, because you could build an octahedron off of this, and you can build the star tetrahedron. You could build a star tetrahedron. Once you build the octahedron off of this, you build a star tetrahedron. But there's the center point. But all these lengths throughout the whole thing are all the same from the inside to the outside. So it's like when you get to this 0 point, this is kind of like a 0 point at the middle of this. That's kind of it. I mean, we could put another little Metatron's Tesseract around this and get a smaller cube in there, but pretty much at the center of every little thing is going to have this little point that's going to somehow relate to this geometry as we get smaller and smaller into the finest point, which is now within all of these structures. So I'll show you this too. After I created was building with the blocks and drawing that, I was, wanted to make it spherical, because you could see how those hexagons would just go around, and there's 4 hoops that come together around this. And that would be the square side where the octahedron is, and also where the triangular, tetrahedron point would come off. But, this is like 3 years ago. And then I drew the lines of the energy, the arrows that would go around to create a little swirling, energy vortexes around these different sites. So, this is taking all the straight lines and everything and moving it into the sphere. And you know, I did this in these next few images to demonstrate what that is going to look like. So here it is. I think this, you know, I don't know, you see this all around representing atoms around, you know, like here's a proton and here's atoms zipping all around this thing, right? And, you know, as we come back here and put this connected there, here's it without the internal structure. Uh, that is giving us one other thing on this. It's also, I forget the person who coined the name on it, but this was called the Genesa crystal, Genesa crystal, I believe it was called. And people put these in their gardens. People feel that like this Genesa crystal, the spherical shape, increases like it's like actually like a little vortex that pulls in energy. So if you put it in your garden, it helps radiate out the energy that it pulls in a certain way to help plants grow. People, the person who really got excited about this created a whole kind of movement form based on this. I was doing that for a while for fun too, because I always like to experiment with the forms and how they make our bodies move, you know, with some of these spherical shapes. You know, Aikido and Bagua and different arts that base their movements on the sphere and the circle. You know, they basically see themselves inside these spheres when they're doing their movements. So we've got the sphere, and let's now play around with that, because I'll show you where that was now contained within this. Okay, so I went a little over the top here and did a whole bunch of them. Over top the previous structure. So I just started placing them, you know, the bigger ones I did, and then I did the bigger one within the big cube, and then I did a few of the small ones. So I'm going to pull away some of the quantum entanglement chaos that you see here when we take the spheres and give them that movement to them. The other thing, I wouldn't have come up with the right dimensions of how to draw this without also using the dimensions that the Tesseract, Metatron's Tesseract, helped me give me. So, you know, check out this type of form that's created when I'm able to link together the different size. So I've got 3 different scales. I've got a big, the medium, and the smallest scale within these. This has just opened up a whole new kind of artistic way to kind of show the interconnectivity. Picture this like the center of like a proton having different orbits around it. This one could have orbits of all these going on around it. You know, there's this really neat pattern here. I could picture doing a lot of different colors with it. But this now is taking the Cuboctahedron Genesa crystal, and using that, you can use that Genesa crystal as like a base unit now to place within the context of the flower of life, and turn every single one of our straight line, geometrical, you know, logical left brain version, weave them all together and tie it right into the more intuitive, creative, spherical version of things. And the 2 are woven together in all these forms. So I've got a few more slides here, almost coming up on the end. So here I take this, kind of grouped a few things together, and we're going to take this base form. So here's the larger circle with the uprated star tetrahedron. It also includes the star tetrahedron, or the tesseract, that would be at the flower of life view, the hexagon view. And it has the square view in here as well. Let me just zoom in there real quick. Right? So it has all 3 views in here, okay, of the tesseract view, or the cube view. So here's the square view. It's got the hexagon view, and it has the larger tetrahedron, star tetrahedron upright view, vertical view. So that's how they all sort of relate to one another. And I better zoom out, because I think I did another kind of rapid expansion, big drawing here. Yep, I did. Um, so here I take all those and I basically figured out, here's the flower of life underneath here. It's in black. Here's the concentric circles. And I decided to, if I wanted to figure out how the flower of life now is fitting back on this grid. And what I found out was that the grid units on the flower of life, when I've kind of making sure everything kind of like fits together. So I'm always checking previous things that I've done against the new current build, just so it seems streamlined. So the new size for these, these size spheres here are, I believe, 8. I think they're 8. What is it here? Let's get one that's right on the line. Yeah, here's one's on the line. Yep. So that's 8. So the flower of life is based off of now the 8th sphere, right? Which is where the flower of life showed up in the design, right? I kept talking about, well, you invert the square, that brings you to the 7, then you move to the 8, and then when you fully invert it, it moved you up to the 9. So the flower of life, each circle within here is 8. So in this, I was able to just basically make the next smaller one, bring it down to 4, right? So that was a 4. And then I made that one a 2, and I can make it all the way down to the 1, right? So we've got a 1 square unit, even smaller down in there. And then I could make it, double it to the 16. And if I had room, I would go all the way to the 32. But let's just show you the full size. Go from 10% of this, binary sequence now evolution of the flower of life. I showed you how it worked also with the Fibonacci sequence before, but now this is the binary sequence version. So at 10%, this is big. This is like 60 inches to 1 inch at the center. Okay, so on my graphics thing here, it tells me in the PowerPoint, that I'm using a sphere here that's about 60 inches large to a 1 inch size circle down at the smallest. So, here's the huge star now, and this just continually shows that things are always expanding, always evolving, all interlinked. I mean, imagine this built out every single which way and direction. And of course, now it's like in atomic structure view, at least of some sort of motion with the spherical whirling Cuboctahedron version. And if we drop that all the way in from 10 to 100, let's just go and dive in and see what the little Cuboctahedron looks like down in there. And there it is, right? So there's the little version getting down to the center of these smaller and smaller boxes all the way down in there, right? So, this just now is showing how holographic it is, and how multidimensional. Every little center point contains the whole, and it's completely holographic in its nature, like I've been saying in the other videos as well. Oh, got to get out. Let's see where I am. Zoom back out here. Okay, so that is pretty much the whole unlock of the spherical Metatron's Tesseract and what it did to help open up a whole new frame of viewing this sacred geometry into a whole new dimension, literally 4D. I mean, a lot of that's 3D, but with the Tree of Life, you could see how the 4D is coming into play. And the Tesseract, of course, I think is fantastic because it's portraying the cube at the center of a larger cube, but that cube will also be the same size as the corner. So every point in space contains the same point. I said previously in my last video, I was going to really get into the forms that are all contained within Metatron's Tesseract. And that's this yellow structure here that is in the flower of life, or in the far reaches of Metatron's cube on the outer edge of the circles there. Okay. Well, anyway, these lines here, yellow ones, those, they contain the Metatron's Tesseract, but those were actually the Tetraxis hexahedron, the soul star lines that gave me this. So the Tesseract is actually contained within that soul star shape that I'm also bringing forward with the work I've been talking about. So we've got the soul star and the Tesseract, and the two are working together, and Metatron's cube, of course, fits in there. In the previous video, I said I was going to go through, a bunch more of these. I'll just show you like what's up next. Like we're going to go through 20 something, different forms here of how all these things are found within the Soul Star Metatron's Tesseract build. But I'm not going to do that now because I think that that's another thing. And there's some more, Archimedean solids and other forms that I want to figure how they fit and relate into it. So for now, we're just going to stop at that. And I'm going to leave that for some time in the future. That was really just a kind of fantastic overview for me to share that with you. Really excited about getting a lot of this material out, seeing how it relates to the different communities, whether it's spiritual community, scientific community, whatever it is. The beauty for me is that it all relates and links back to the grid, the Christ consciousness grid, the Buddha nature, really talking about our consciousness shift to a much more compassionate, open, receptive, loving, forgiving mindset and way of being in life, being harmless, being mellow, being able to see more views from many different perspectives, like a 4D view, seeing things in different ways from different angles. All these are metaphors. These shapes and forms and the things I'm showing are really metaphors and reality at the same time to help shift our perspective. Jump from the 6 or the 5 to the 7 to the 8 to the 9, whatever it is. Don't get caught on the numbers. It's totally part of the evolutionary process, and in one way or another, we're all bound to be going through some transformation like this and related to this. And whatever you gravitate to or feel connected to that really makes you feel like you're in the flow, open and excited, your heart's open, you're smiling, you're feeling the passion and the joy, you're feeling the love inside, then do that. Do that. And for me, this is that. And I think that for others, this is something that you may gravitate to help you on your path and journey too. So peace, blessings, and much love to you. I really enjoyed sharing that with you.